$200 for a dead Aston Martin. Grant Holloway laughed so loudly the auctioneer had to pause, and every head in that cold Ohio warehouse turned toward the tired single dad standing in the back with oil on his hands and his little girl beside him. The car sat beneath a row of buzzing fluorescent lights, buried under dust, its once beautiful silver paint dulled to the color of old rain, one tire flat, the windshield cracked, the leather seat split open like a story nobody wanted to finish. The auction tag hanging from the mirror said non-running, no title history, parts only, and to everyone in that room, that was enough. They saw rust. They saw bad luck. They saw a poor man about to make a foolish mistake. But Ethan Caldwell saw something else. He saw the long hood, the hand-shaped curves, the strange quiet dignity of a machine that had been mocked simply because it had stopped moving. His daughter Lily held his sleeve with both hands, her blue eyes moving from the car to the men laughing near the front row. "Daddy," she whispered, "is it really dead?" Ethan looked at the Aston Martin for a long moment, then lowered his voice. Sometimes dead things are only waiting for someone patient enough to listen. The auctioneer cleared his throat and tapped the clipboard against his palm. "Opening bid is $200. Anybody want the privilege of hauling this British coffin out of here?" More laughter rolled through the warehouse. Grant Holloway, owner of the biggest luxury showroom in 3 counties, leaned back in his pressed navy suit and smirked. "I'll give you 50 if you throw in a tow truck and an apology." A few men chuckled. Someone near the coffee table lifted a phone to record. Ethan felt the weight of the folded bills in his pocket, money he should have kept for groceries, for Lily's school shoes, for the heater at home that clicked more than it warmed. He had just been denied a small business loan that morning. His garage was 3 weeks behind on rent. Every sensible part of him told him to keep his hand down. But then the warehouse door opened slightly, letting in a blade of winter air, and the dust across the Aston's hood shifted. Like breath. Ethan raised his hand. The laughter stopped for half a second, then came back louder. "200 from Mr. Caldwell," the auctioneer said, almost pitying him. "Going once. Going twice. Sold." Grant turned around with a grin sharp enough to cut. "Enjoy your dead toy, mechanic." Ethan did not answer. He walked forward, signed the paper, and took the rusted key from the clerk. As he bent to pick up the old key tag, his thumb brushed against 3 tiny engraved letters nearly hidden beneath grime. WLP. Ethan froze, just for a breath, while the whole room kept laughing behind him. The tow truck dropped the Aston Martin in front of Caldwell Auto and Repair just after sunset, when the sky over Millbrook, Ohio had turned the color of cold steel and the streetlights were beginning to flicker awake. Ethan stood with one hand on the driver's side fender while Lily watched from the open garage door, wrapped in her pink winter coat, her breath showing in tiny clouds. The shop was small, older than most of the buildings around it, with peeling red letters on the sign and a concrete floor stained by 20 years of oil, coffee, and second chances. Ethan had inherited nothing fancy in life, not money, not land, not a name that opened doors, just a set of tools, a tired heart, and a little girl who still believed he could fix anything. Inside the office, past the cracked window and the calendar from last year, 3 overdue envelopes waited on his desk. Rent. Electric. Medical debt from Mara's final year. He saw them every morning and carried them every night, not in his pocket, but somewhere heavier. Lily stepped closer to the Aston Martin and touched the dusty door with one finger. "Are we in trouble because you bought it?" Ethan looked at her, then at the heater in the corner clicking twice before giving up again. He could have lied. A softer man might have. But Ethan had learned that children could feel the shape of truth even when adults tried to hide it. "We are not in trouble," he said gently. "We are rebuilding." Lily studied him like she wanted to believe every word. "Mom used to say that." Ethan smiled, but it did not quite reach his eyes. "Your mom used to say a lot of wise things." He unlocked the garage, pushed up the rattling door, and guided the Aston inside inch by inch. The old tires groaned across the concrete. The chains clinked. Somewhere in the rafters, rainwater tapped into a metal bucket with the steady rhythm of a clock counting down. By morning, half the town had seen the video. Someone had posted Ethan raising his hand at the auction, and the comments came fast. $200 Aston Dad. Poor guy lost his mind. Somebody stop that man before he buys a submarine next. Grant Holloway even drove by around lunch in a polished black Range Rover, rolled down his window, and smiled like charity had dressed itself as insult. I will give you $500 right now, Ethan. Save yourself the embarrassment. Ethan wiped his hands on a rag. No thank you. Grant laughed softly. Pride is expensive when you are broke. Ethan looked back at the garage, where Lily was taping labels onto small plastic bins for screws and bolts. So is disrespect, he said. Grant's smile faded, but only for a moment, and then he drove away. That evening, after Lily finished her homework at the workbench, Ethan rolled a shop light beneath the Aston and began checking the frame. The air smelled of dust, old leather, and rain-soaked concrete. He followed the line of the chassis with patient fingers until his light caught something strange near the firewall. The vehicle identification number was there, but part of it had been ground down, not by rust, not by time, but by a deliberate hand. Ethan stopped moving. Above him, the shop light hummed. Behind him, Lily whispered, "Daddy, what is it?" Ethan stared at the damaged numbers and spoke so quietly it sounded almost like a prayer. Someone did not want this car to be found. The next morning, a white Mercedes pulled up outside Caldwell Auto and Repair just as Ethan was lowering the Aston Martin from the jack stands. The car looked even worse in daylight, its cracked windshield catching the pale sun, its dust turning gray against the shop lights, its front grille hanging slightly crooked like an old man too proud to ask for help. Lily was sitting at the workbench with a peanut butter sandwich and a spelling worksheet when the Mercedes door opened. A woman stepped out in a camel coat, dark boots, and sunglasses that looked too expensive for Millbrook. She did not rush. She looked at the shop sign, then at the Aston, then at Ethan, as if each detail was being placed into a careful file inside her mind. "Ethan Caldwell?" she asked. Ethan wiped his hands on a towel and nodded. "That depends on who is asking." She removed her sunglasses. Her eyes were clear gray, calm but guarded. "Claire Whitmore. I evaluate rare European automobiles for private collections and preservation trusts." Lily whispered from the bench, "That sounds important." Claire glanced at the little girl, softened for half a second, then returned to Ethan. "I saw the auction video. I also saw the comments. I came because I think you may have purchased something that can become a legal problem." Ethan leaned against the workbench, quiet, steady. "Most people came to laugh." "I did not come to laugh," Claire said. "I came to warn you." Before Ethan could answer, the bell over the shop door jingled, and Grant Holloway walked in wearing a wool overcoat and the pleased expression of a man who enjoyed arriving where he had not been invited. "Claire Whitmore in a one-bay repair shop," he said. "Now this is worth the drive." Claire did not smile. "Grant." He looked at Ethan and then at the Aston with theatrical pity. "Please tell me you are not wasting professional expertise on this tragedy." Ethan said nothing. Grant stepped closer to the car. "It is a parts shell with a bad story and a worse owner. He should have taken my offer." Lily's face tightened, but Ethan gently touched her shoulder without looking away from Grant. "Words do not make a thing true," Ethan said. "No," Grant replied. "Paperwork does. And you do not have any." The garage went still. Outside, a pickup rolled past slowly, the driver staring through the window. Claire moved around the Aston, studying the body line, the door seam, the angle of the hood. Her first expression said doubt. Her second said caution. Then Ethan crouched beside the passenger side panel and motioned for her to come closer. "Look. Here," he said. "Factory paint would not layer like this." Claire hesitated, then knelt in her expensive coat without seeming to care about the concrete dust. Ethan took a soft cloth, rubbed gently beneath a flaked edge near the rocker panel, and revealed a deep shade of green under the silver, darker than pine, richer than bottle glass. Claire's face changed. Grant folded his arms. Paint. Amazing discovery. Claire ignored him. She leaned closer, almost forgetting the room around her. Where did you find this? Under 3 layers, Ethan said. Not sprayed like a repair. Sealed like original. Claire touched the color with one careful fingertip, and her voice dropped until even Grant stopped smirking. This color was never sold to the public. Lily slid off the stool and came nearer. So what does that mean? Claire looked at the damaged identification number, then back at the hidden green paint, and for the first time since she arrived, she looked at Ethan not like a desperate mechanic, but like a man standing beside a locked door only he had known how to find. It means, she whispered, this car may have been built for someone who was never supposed to exist on paper. Claire did not leave after the discovery. She should have, because people like her usually entered small places with a purpose and exited before the dust could touch them, but something about the hidden green paint held her there. Ethan gave her no speech, no promise, no desperate sales pitch. He only rolled out an old folding table, placed each removed part on a clean towel, and began labeling what the world had already dismissed. Day 1 started with the battery tray, corroded nearly through. Day 2 brought a fuel line packed with varnish so old it smelled like bitter syrup. Day 3 revealed wiring chewed by mice behind the dash, each strand brittle enough to snap beneath careless fingers. Lily helped after school, printing labels in block letters, smiling whenever Ethan called her his inventory manager. The garage filled with the slow music of restoration, socket wrenches clicking, rain tapping the roof, cardboard boxes sliding across concrete, Claire turning pages in old registry. Books she had brought from her office in Columbus. Grant Holloway came by twice, never stepping fully inside, just standing near the open door with his polished shoes safely away from the oil stains. You are wasting time, he said the first time. Maybe, Ethan answered. You cannot make history out of junk. No, Ethan said, checking a relay beneath the dash. But you can uncover it. Grant laughed, yet the sound had less strength than before. By the 4th night, the town had already chosen sides. Some people slowed down to stare. Some still joked online. One man left a cardboard sign by the door that read, "Rest in peace, fancy car." Lily found it before Ethan did and carried it inside with trembling hands. Ethan looked at the sign, then at his daughter's face, and gently took it from her. Do not let small people teach you smallness, he said. What do we do with it? She asked. Ethan folded the sign once, twice, and placed it under a wobbly table leg. We make it useful. Claire watched from the office doorway, and something in her expression shifted, not admiration exactly, but respect beginning to wake up. Later, when Lily fell asleep on the old vinyl couch beneath Mara's faded quilt, Ethan kept working under the passenger seat. The shop heater clicked. The fluorescent light hummed. Outside, sleet whispered against the glass like fingers asking to come in. Claire sat nearby, her coat folded over her lap, reviewing a photocopied factory record from 1964. Most mechanics would have stripped it by now, she said. Ethan loosened a rusted bolt with patient pressure. Most people strip things when they do not understand them. And you understand it? He paused, listening to the small settling sounds of metal and age. Not yet. But I respect it. The bolt finally turned. A narrow panel beneath the rear of the passenger seat shifted loose, too cleanly to be accidental. Ethan frowned, reached deeper, and felt the edge of something flat wrapped in oilcloth. Claire stood. Lily stirred but did not wake. Ethan pulled the bundle free and laid it under the shop light. Inside was a yellowed photograph, a hand-drawn engineering diagram, and a sealed letter marked with the same 3 letters from the key tag. WLP. Claire's face lost its color. Where did you get that? Ethan looked from the letter to her trembling hand. I think, he said quietly, the car just started talking. Claire did not reach for the letter right away. She stood beneath the buzzing shop light with her hand pressed lightly against the edge of the workbench, staring at those 3 faded letters as if they had reached across 60 years and spoken her name. W.L.P. Whitmore Le Mans prototype. Ethan had not said the full meaning, but Claire already knew it, and the knowing seemed to make the garage smaller around her. Lily sat up on the couch, rubbing her eyes beneath Mara's quilt. Is it bad? She asked. Claire swallowed. No, sweetheart. I think it may be very important. Ethan used a clean blade to open the brittle seal, slow enough that even the paper seemed to trust him. Inside was a letter written in blue ink, the handwriting elegant but hurried, along with a photograph of a younger man in a shop coat standing beside the same Aston Martin when its paint was still a deep green and its chrome still bright as morning. Claire took one step closer. That is my grandfather, she whispered. Arthur Whitmore. The name changed the air. Grant had spoken of paperwork like it was power, but this was something deeper than paperwork. This was memory. This was family. Claire read the first line aloud, her voice unsteady but clear. If this car is ever found, let it be known that I did not destroy the Whitmore name. I tried to save it. Silence filled Caldwell Auto and Repair so completely that even the rain on the roof seemed to soften. Claire lowered the letter, and the polished confidence she had brought into the garage began to crack in quiet, human places. She explained that Arthur Whitmore had been the shame of her family story, a brilliant engineer accused of wasting family money on a secret racing project that disappeared before it could prove itself. Her father had called him reckless. Her grandmother had refused to speak his name. The family had built galleries, foundations, and polished rooms full of expensive cars, but they had buried the one man who had loved machines enough to risk his reputation for them. Ethan listened without interrupting. He did not lean into her pain. He did not turn the moment into a bargain. He only placed the photograph on a clean towel and weighted its corners with 4 small sockets so it would not curl. Maybe this car is not the only thing they buried, he said. Claire looked at him then, really looked, beyond the worn shirt, the tired eyes, and the grease beneath his fingernails. How did you learn to see things other people miss? Ethan glanced toward Lily, who was now sitting quietly with her knees pulled to her chest. My father restored race cars outside Dayton, he said. When he was sober, he could hear a bad valve from 20 feet away. When he was not, I learned to listen for myself. Claire's expression softened. You were trained? I was offered a scholarship once. Automotive engineering. Michigan. He gave a small smile that carried no pride. Then Mara got sick. Lily was little. Dreams do not always disappear. Sometimes they just step aside so love can walk first. Claire had no answer to that. Outside the front window, a dark sedan rolled slowly past the shop, then disappeared down the wet street. Ethan noticed it, but said nothing. Near the door, Grant Holloway sat in his own vehicle across the road, his phone pressed to his ear, watching the garage lights burn late. Inside, Claire folded the letter carefully, unaware that someone else had just learned the miracle was real. By the 6th night, the garage no longer felt like a place where people fixed cars. It felt like a chapel built out of concrete, old tools, and quiet hope. The Aston Martin sat beneath 2 work lights, its faded body partly stripped, its hidden green paint showing in careful patches like truth rising through layers of dust. Claire had stayed later than she meant to again, sitting at Ethan's desk with Arthur Whitmore's letter inside a plastic sleeve, comparing every sentence to records from her family archive. Lily had fallen asleep in the office chair with a pencil in her hand and a parts label stuck to her sleeve. Ethan moved gently around her, lowering his voice even when he spoke to the engine. You talk to it like it can hear you, Claire said. Ethan adjusted a cracked distributor cap beneath the light. Most things hear more than we think. Claire looked at Lily, then at the photograph of her grandfather beside the car. My family spent years saying Arthur was careless. Ethan did not look up. People call a man careless when they do not want to understand what he carried. Outside, rain slid down the shop windows in silver lines. Across the street, Grant Holloway's showroom glowed clean and bright, all glass walls and polished cars that had never known hunger, debt, or ridicule. Around 9:30, a deputy cruiser pulled into the lot, followed by Grant's Range Rover and a dark sedan with legal plates. Ethan stepped outside beneath the awning as Deputy Martin approached with an envelope. Grant stood behind him, hands in his coat pockets, smiling without warmth. "I told you paperwork matters," Grant said. Ethan took the envelope and read the top line. Temporary claim of disputed property. Allegation of improper auction clearance. Request to suspend restoration and sale. Claire stepped beside him. "This is absurd." Grant tilted his head. "No, Claire. This is business. A vehicle with altered identification, hidden documents, and a man in financial distress suddenly claiming a lost prototype. It raises questions." Lily appeared in the doorway, sleepy and frightened. "Daddy, are they taking the car?" Ethan folded the paper slowly. He could feel the whole town pressing against that moment, every laugh, every comment, every person who had decided he was too poor to be honest. Deputy Martin looked uncomfortable. "Ethan, until the hearing, you cannot transfer it, hide it, or alter any identifying marks." "I am sorry." Grant's smile widened. "Should have taken the 500. Ethan looked at him then, not angry, not broken, only still. "You mistake quiet for weakness." Grant gave a soft laugh. "No, I mistake fantasy for fraud." Claire turned sharply. "Be careful." But Ethan raised one hand, gentle, stopping the argument before it could become something ugly. "Lily," he said, "go inside." "But Daddy." "Inside, sweetheart." She obeyed, though her eyes stayed on him. When the vehicles left, the rain seemed louder than before. Ethan stood alone in the lot with the envelope in his hand, his shirt damp at the shoulders, his face unreadable beneath the yellow light. Claire came beside him. "You could fight him publicly." "I know people. I can make calls." Ethan shook his head. "I am fighting. Standing here. Not becoming him." Inside the garage, Lily sat at the desk wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. On the floor near the wastebasket, a small strip of photographic film had slipped from the old oilcloth bundle during the commotion. She picked it up, held it toward the desk lamp, and saw Arthur Whitmore standing beside the Aston Martin beneath a banner that read Prototype 1. Her breathing changed. The men outside thought they had stopped the miracle. They had not seen the little girl holding the proof. By day 14, Caldwell Auto and Repair was no longer a joke whispered over coffee in Millbrook. It had become the place everyone drove past slowly, pretending not to stare. Pickup trucks lined the curb before sunrise. A local reporter stood across the street with a camera. Deputy Martin arrived early, looking more nervous than official. Claire came with two preservation experts from New York and one retired Aston Martin historian from Connecticut, an elderly man named Walter Briggs who carried a leather notebook and walked toward the car like he was entering a church. Grant Holloway arrived last, of course, stepping from his Range Rover in a charcoal coat, smiling for the people watching from the sidewalk. "Big day, Ethan," he called out. "Ready to start your $10 million lawn ornament?" A few people laughed, but softly, as if laughter itself had begun to feel unsafe. Ethan did not answer. He was inside the garage, sleeves rolled, hands clean for once, standing beside the Aston with Lily at his side. The car was still imperfect. The paint was not finished. The chrome still carried age. The seats had not been replaced, only stabilized. But the engine bay had changed. Wires were routed with care. Fuel lines were clean. Every bolt Ethan touched had been returned with patience, not pride. Claire placed Lily's photographic strip beside the letter and the old engineering diagram on a table for the experts. Walter Briggs leaned over it, took out a magnifying glass, and went very still. "Where did this come from?" he asked. Lily raised her hand like she was in class. "It fell out of the wrapping. I thought it mattered." Walter looked at her with deep respect. "Young lady, history is often saved by people who notice small things." Grant stepped forward. "Can we stop worshipping scrapbook material and test the car?" Ethan looked at Claire. Claire nodded. Deputy Martin folded his arms. The crowd pressed closer to the open garage door. Ethan opened the driver door, and the old hinges gave a low creak, not weak, but awake. He sat behind the wheel. For a moment, he rested his hand on the dashboard, feeling the cold leather, the years, the doubt, the laughter, the nights Lily had slept in the office because home was too cold. He turned the key. The starter clicked once and died. Grant chuckled. Ethan turned it again. The engine coughed, shook, then fell silent. Someone outside whispered, "Poor guy." Lily stepped closer to the window. "Daddy," she said, steady but small, "listen to it." Ethan closed his eyes. He heard what others missed, not failure, not death, but timing. He opened the hood again, adjusted one ignition lead by a quarter inch, checked the choke, and tightened the connection beneath the distributor cap. Grant sighed loudly. "Are we done pretending?" Ethan returned to the driver's seat. He looked once at Lily, once at Claire, and turned the key a third time. The engine caught with a deep metallic breath, then roared alive, smooth and rich, filling the garage with a sound that seemed too grand for that little street in Ohio. No one laughed. The reporter lowered her camera. Deputy Martin stared. Grant's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Walter Briggs stepped forward with tears shining in his eyes, listening to the rhythm like a hymn from another century. "That idle," he whispered. "That cam profile. That exhaust note." Claire's hands trembled over Arthur Whitmore's letter. Walter turned to the room, his voice breaking under the weight of certainty. "This is not a parts car. This is the lost Whitmore Le Mans prototype. Prototype 1. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of every cruel word returning to the people who had spoken them. The confirmation of Prototype 1 changed everything, but it did not change Ethan Caldwell. While reporters called, collectors emailed, and people who had laughed at him suddenly found reasons to stop by with coffee and apologies, Ethan still opened the garage at 7 each morning, still packed Lily's lunch in a brown paper bag, still wiped every tool before placing it back in the drawer. Claire arranged the formal authentication through a private auction house in New York, and within 3 days the Aston Martin was transported in a climate-controlled trailer, not as junk, not as a rumor, but as a rediscovered piece of racing history. Ethan rode in the passenger seat of Claire's car behind it, wearing his cleanest shirt and the only sport coat he owned. Lily sat in the back with the old photograph of Arthur Whitmore resting in her lap like a family Bible. The auction hall was nothing like Caldwell Auto and Repair. It had marble floors, soft golden lights, quiet men in tailored suits, and women who spoke in low voices beside glasses of sparkling water. The Aston sat at the center of the room under a white spotlight, its green paint carefully revealed in sections, its age preserved instead of erased. A placard beside it read, "Whitmore Le Mans Prototype 1, restored and authenticated by Ethan Caldwell." Ethan read his own name twice, then looked away as if it belonged to someone else. Grant Holloway arrived just before the preview began, polished, confident, and strangely eager to be seen. He moved through the room shaking hands, telling anyone who would listen that he had recognized the car's potential early. "I tried to acquire it before the story broke," he said smoothly to a collector from Dallas. "Some people need guidance before they understand what they are holding." Claire heard him. She did not interrupt right away. She waited until the auction director introduced the car, until the room grew still, until the large screen behind the stage lit up with a short presentation about the vehicle's rediscovery. First came Arthur Whitmore's photograph. Then the engineering diagram. Then Lily's recovered film strip. And then, without warning, the screen showed the original warehouse video, Grant laughing, calling the Aston a British coffin, offering Ethan pity dressed as mockery. The room did not gasp. It did something worse for a proud man. It became quiet. Claire stepped to the microphone, her voice calm enough to carry truth without anger. Mr. Caldwell did not buy this car because he expected wealth. He bought it because he believed discarded things deserve respect. He protected my grandfather's legacy before he knew it was valuable. That is not luck. That is character. Grant lowered his eyes. No one moved toward him. No one asked for his explanation. The bidding began at $1 million. A phone bidder raised it to $2 million. A museum trust offered $3.5 million. A private collector from California went to $5 million. Ethan sat beside Lily in the second row, his hands folded, his face quiet, as if each number was passing over him rather than landing. At $7 million, Lily slipped her hand into his. At $8.5 million, Claire looked back and smiled through tears she refused to wipe away. At $9.7 million, the room held its breath. Then the final bidder, representing the Whitmore Preservation Foundation, raised the paddle one last time. $10 million, the auctioneer announced. The gavel came down. Applause rose around Ethan like weather, but he did not stand right away. He bent his head, closed his eyes, and for a moment he was not in New York at all. He was back in a cold Ohio garage with Mara's quilt over Lily's shoulders, listening to a dead engine learn how to breathe again. When he finally stood, Lily wrapped both arms around him. Claire watched them from across the aisle, and the whole elegant room seemed to understand that the real restoration had never been made of steel, leather, or paint. The money did not make Ethan Caldwell louder. It did not make him cruel. It did not turn his hands soft or his heart proud. 2 months after the auction, the old sign above Caldwell Auto and Repair came down on a clear Saturday morning while half of Millbrook pretended they had always believed in him. Ethan stood on a ladder with Lily holding the screws in a paper cup below, and together they raised a new sign painted in deep green with cream letters, Caldwell and Mara Restoration, Second Chances Built Here. He paid the rent on the building for the next 10 years. He cleared Mara's medical debt. He replaced the heater at home, bought Lily new school shoes, and opened a college account so large she asked if college came with a castle. But the first thing he built was not for himself. In the back of the shop, where the rain bucket used to sit, Ethan set up 4 workbenches for students who wanted to learn engines, wiring, patience, and respect. Every Wednesday afternoon, kids from the high school came in with old bicycles, lawn-mower motors, and dreams they were embarrassed to say out loud. Ethan never laughed at any of them. He only said, "Show me what still works, and we will start there." Claire Whitmore returned in early spring, driving the same white Mercedes, but she no longer looked out of place in the garage. She wore jeans, brought coffee in cardboard cups, and carried a framed photograph of Arthur Whitmore beside Prototype 1. The restored Aston now sat in the Whitmore Preservation Gallery in New York with Ethan's name listed beneath the display as lead restorer. Claire gave Lily a smaller copy of the photograph. On the back, she had written, "To the girl who noticed what grown-ups missed." Lily read it 3 times, then hugged it to her chest. Claire turned to Ethan, her voice softer than the first day she had walked through his door. "I misjudged you." Ethan tightened a bolt on an old pickup and smiled faintly. "Most people did. You could be angry about that." "I was," he said. "Then I remembered anger is heavy, and I have a daughter to carry." Claire looked toward Lily, who was helping a freshman sort washers by size. "You restored more than a car, Ethan." He glanced around the shop, at the students, the tools, the sunlight across the concrete, the empty corner where the Aston had once sat like a forgotten ghost. "Maybe," he said. "But I think it restored us too." Later that afternoon, Grant Holloway drove past the garage slowly. His showroom across town was still bright, still polished, still full of expensive cars, but people no longer spoke his name with the same admiration. He stopped at the curb for a moment and looked at the new sign. Ethan saw him through the window. Grant gave a stiff nod, the smallest apology pride could afford. Ethan returned it, not because Grant deserved grace, but because Ethan refused to let another man's shame decide the size of his own heart. Near closing time, a boy no older than 11 rolled a broken bicycle to the open bay door. The chain hung loose, the front tire wobbled, and his jacket was too thin for the wind. "Mr. Caldwell," the boy asked, "how much to fix it?" Ethan looked at Lily. Lily smiled, already reaching for the toolbox. Ethan knelt beside the bicycle and spun the pedal once. It clicked, struggled, then caught for half a turn. $200 once bought me a miracle," he said gently. "This one is on the house." As the evening light warmed the green sign above the door, the shop filled with the quiet sound of small things being repaired. And in that sound lived the truth Ethan had carried all along: dignity does not need to shout, goodness does not need applause, and sometimes what the world calls dead is only waiting for the right hands to help it rise again.